What's up, everyone? Welcome back to HOA Climax. Today I'm bringing you one of the most outrageous HOA stories you'll ever hear. Picture this: 60 strangers show up on your private property with folding chairs and a microphone, claiming they have every right to be there for their HOA meeting. That's exactly what happened when an entitled HOA decided my friend Jake's private 8-acre lake was their community property. But here's the twist: these greedy board members had no idea they were messing with someone who had the resources and determination to completely destroy them. The question is, who really owns the land, and what happens when you mess with the wrong property owner? Trust me, this revenge is absolutely epic and will leave you speechless. So let me give you some background first. My friend Jake owns a stunning 50-acre property in what used to be a pretty rural area outside of town. The centerpiece of his land is this absolutely gorgeous 8-acre natural lake that has been in his family for 3 generations. His grandfather bought this property back in the 1950s, and when he passed, it went to Jake's dad, and when his father died 5 years ago, it came to Jake. Now here's the important part. This lake is completely contained within Jake's property boundaries. It doesn't touch any property lines. It's totally private, sitting right in the middle of his 50 acres. Jake lives in a modest 3-bedroom house that his dad built in the 1980s, not far from the beautiful lakeshore. Nothing fancy, just a comfortable family home. This lake has always been Jake's sanctuary. His family has held reunions there for decades. Jake fishes it regularly. His kids learn to swim in those waters, and there's a small dock and a couple of picnic tables that his dad built by hand. It's been their private family retreat for over 70 years. Now here's where things get interesting. About 4 years ago, developers started building a subdivision right next to Jake's property. Nothing too crazy at first, just nice middle-class homes on half-acre lots. The development was called Lakeside Estates HOA, which Jake always thought was kind of ironic since they don't actually have any lake access. The developers just named it that because you can see Jake's private lake from some of the houses. When the first family started moving in, everything was perfectly fine. Nice people, they would wave to each other, no problems whatsoever. But as more houses got built and the neighborhood filled up with new residents, things started changing dramatically. About 2 years ago, these new residents formed an official HOA. Now I want to be crystal clear here. Jake's property predates their subdivision by literally decades. He never signed anything, never agreed to be part of any HOA, and never received any documentation about joining their association. His property is completely separate from their development, different street address, different legal description, totally independent. But apparently some of these new residents thought Jake's beautiful lake looked real nice from their backyards, and they started getting ideas. It started small at first. Jake would occasionally see people walking their dogs along the edge of his property near the lake. Then he noticed some kids had built a rope swing on one of his trees that was overhanging the water. Jake didn't make a big deal about it initially. I mean, kids being kids, you know? But then more and more people started showing up. One Saturday morning in June, Jake is having his coffee on his back porch when he sees this woman he doesn't recognize setting up what looks like a full family picnic right on his lakeshore. She's got tables, chairs, a grill, coolers, the whole 9 yards. So Jake walks down there to investigate. "Excuse me," Jake said politely, "but this is actually private property, and you're currently on my land." She looked at him like he had grown a second head. "Oh, you must be mistaken. This is community property. I'm on the HOA board, and we have designated this as a public recreational area for all HOA residents." Jake just stared at her for a second, completely shocked. "Ma'am, I think there's been some serious confusion here. This is my property. I own this lake and all the land around it. You're currently standing on my private property without any permission." She got this incredibly smug look on her face and said, Sir, I don't know who told you that, but you're completely wrong. The HOA has done a comprehensive property survey, and this lake and surrounding area is officially designated as a common area for our community. If you're a resident of the HOA, you should have received the documentation about this designation. Well, I'm not a resident of your HOA, Jake told her firmly. I live right up there, he pointed to his house, and I've owned this property for 5 years. My family has owned it for over 70 years. This is definitely private property. She just rolled her eyes dismissively and said, Look, I don't have time to argue with you about this. I'm setting up for my daughter's birthday party, and we properly reserved this space through the correct channels. If you have a problem with it, you can contact the HOA office. At this point, Jake is getting pretty irritated. Ma'am, you need to pack up your stuff and leave immediately. This is private property, and you are trespassing. I'm calling the cops, she said, pulling out her phone. This is harassment and intimidation. Go ahead, Jake told her calmly. Call them. I'll be happy to show them my property deed. She made the call, and about 20 minutes later, a sheriff's deputy showed up. The woman Jake found out later, her name was Tiffany, and she was the HOA president, immediately started complaining about how Jake was harassing her and trying to prevent her from using community property. The deputy listened to both sides and then asked Jake to see his documentation. After reviewing Jake's property deed and surveying the boundaries, the deputy turned to Tiffany. Ma'am, he told her, this gentleman is absolutely correct. This is private property. You need to pack up and leave immediately. Tiffany went absolutely ballistic. That's impossible. The HOA wouldn't have designated this as community property if it wasn't legally ours. Someone made a serious mistake here. The deputy was very patient and professional. Ma'am, the HOA doesn't have the legal authority to designate someone else's private property as community property. This gentleman owns this land. You need to leave now, or I'll have to cite you for criminal trespassing. She packed up her stuff, but she was absolutely furious about it. As she was leaving, she turned back to Jake and said menacingly, This is not over. The HOA is going to investigate this thoroughly, and we will get to the bottom of it. Jake thought that would be the end of it, but boy was he wrong. Over the next few weeks, Jake started getting official letters from the HOA. The first one was pretty official looking, addressed to HOA resident, and informing him about new community guidelines for the use of common areas, including the lake. It talked about reserving time slots for events, keeping the area clean, no alcohol allowed, no loud music after 9 p.m., that sort of thing. Of course, Jake just threw it away. The second letter was much more direct and threatening. It was addressed to Jake personally and stated that while there had been some confusion about property boundaries, their research had confirmed that the lake was indeed community property, and Jake needed to stop interfering with residents' rightful use of the area. Jake called the number on the letterhead and asked to speak with someone about this property issue. They transferred him directly to Tiffany. Oh, it's you, she said when Jake explained who he was. Look, we have done our research and we know exactly what we're talking about. That lake has been used by the community for years. It's been used by my family for 70 years, Jake told her, and I have the legal deed to prove that I own it. Deeds can be wrong, she said dismissively. We have consulted with our lawyers, and they have assured us that we have legitimate community rights to that water feature. Your lawyers are completely wrong, Jake said. And if people don't stop trespassing on my property, I'm going to start calling the police every single time. You do that, she said, and hung up on him. The letters kept coming after that. They got progressively more threatening, talking about potential legal action and interference with community rights. One letter even suggested that Jake was grandfathered in as a lake user, but that he couldn't legally prevent other residents from accessing it. Then the phone calls started. different HOA board members calling to discuss the situation. Every conversation was exactly the same. They insisted they had rights to the lake. Jake insisted it was his private property. They threatened legal action, and Jake told them to bring it on. Around this time, Jake decided to be proactive. He contacted a property lawyer and had him send a cease and desist letter to the HOA, clearly stating that the lake was private property and any continued trespassing would result in serious legal action. Jake also had private property no trespassing signs made and posted them all around the lake. This really pissed them off. Tiffany called Jake the very day after he put up the signs. "You cannot put up signs on community property," she said angrily. "That's vandalism and destruction of public property." "It's my property," Jake told her. "I can put up whatever signs I want." "We'll see about that," she said ominously. 2 days later, all the signs were gone. Every single one just vanished overnight. Jake put up new signs, but they disappeared again within 48 hours. This went on for weeks. Jake would put up signs, they would disappear, and he started getting nastier letters from the HOA about illegal signage and destruction of community property. Finally, Jake had enough. He called the sheriff's office and filed a formal complaint about the ongoing trespassing and theft of his property signs. They assigned Deputy Walker to do a comprehensive property check and take Jake's statement. Deputy Walker was very thorough. He looked at all of Jake's documentation, walked the property boundaries with him, and took detailed photos of everything. He also gave Jake some valuable advice. "Here's what I would do," Deputy Walker said. "Set up some security cameras around the lake. If they're stealing your signs or trespassing, you'll have solid evidence. Right now, it's just a he said, she said situation, and that's hard to prosecute." So Jake bought several high-quality trail cameras and set them up strategically around the lake. Motion-activated, night vision, the works. Within just 1 week, Jake had clear footage of HOA board members removing his signs. He also had extensive footage of numerous families using his lake swimming, fishing, having picnics, and even leaving trash behind. Jake took all the footage to Deputy Walker, and he was absolutely amazed. "That's definitely theft and criminal trespassing," Deputy Walker said. "How do you want to handle this?" Jake told him he wanted to file charges against anyone he could identify in the videos. Deputy Walker helped him go through all the footage, and they identified Tiffany and 2 other HOA board members clearly removing signs. They also identified several families trespassing on the property. Deputy Walker went to the HOA and informed them that criminal charges were being filed. He also delivered another cease and desist letter from Jake's lawyer. You would think this would calm things down, right? Absolutely not. Instead, it escalated everything to a whole new level. Well, an asterisk asterisk. Part 2. Asterisk asterisk. Jake started getting certified letters from the HOA's lawyer, demanding that he stop harassing community members and threatening to sue him for interference with community rights and preventing access to common areas. Jake's lawyer actually laughed when he saw these letters. "They don't really have a leg to stand on," he told Jake. "But if they want to waste money on a frivolous lawsuit, let them try. We'll countersue for trespassing, theft, harassment, and legal fees." Oh, this is where things get absolutely crazy. One Friday evening in late August, Jake is grilling dinner on his back porch when he hears cars pulling up. Lots of cars. He looks toward the lake and sees people parking along the road and walking onto his property. At first, he thinks it's just another family gathering, but then he sees more cars, and more, and more. Within an hour, there are probably 60 people on Jake's property around his lake. They've got folding chairs set up in neat rows, a podium, a microphone and speaker system, and someone has even set up a registration table. It looks like they're having some kind of official meeting or conference. Jake walks down there to see what the hell's going on. "Excuse me," Jake says to the woman at the registration table. "What's happening here?" "Oh, this is the quarterly HOA general meeting," she says cheerfully. "All residents should have received proper notice in the mail." "Well, this is on my private property," Jake tells her firmly. "You cannot hold a meeting here without my permission." She looks confused and calls over Tiffany, who Jake recognizes from their previous encounters. Tiffany sees Jake and gets this look like she just ate something incredibly sour. "What do you want?" Tiffany asks rudely. "I want to know why you're holding an official meeting on my private property without permission." "This is community property," Tiffany says loudly so everyone around can hear her. "We've been over this multiple times. You don't own this lake." By now, several people are staring at them. Tiffany continues talking, raising her voice even more. "This gentleman seems to think he owns community property and has been harassing residents who try to use this public space. We have tried to work with him reasonably, but he continues to interfere with legitimate community activities." People are now starting to murmur among themselves, and Jake can tell they're buying into her story. He's getting looks like he's the bad guy here. "Folks," Jake says, raising his voice so everyone can hear, "I need everyone to understand something very important. This is private property. I own this land and this lake. I have the legal deed to prove it. You are all currently trespassing on my property." Tiffany rolls her eyes dramatically. "He has been saying that for months now. We have had this researched thoroughly by professional lawyers. This is definitely community property that belongs to all of us." "Well then, you won't mind if I call the sheriff's department, right?" Jake says, pulling out his phone. "Go ahead," Tiffany says smugly. "We are not doing anything wrong here." So Jake calls 911 and explains that there are approximately 60 people trespassing on his property, holding an unauthorized meeting without his permission. The dispatcher says they'll send multiple units out immediately. While they're waiting, the HOA tries to continue their meeting as if nothing is happening. Tiffany gets up at the podium and starts talking about community issues, upcoming events, budget discussions, and she keeps shooting dirty looks in Jake's direction. About 20 minutes later, 3 sheriff's vehicles pull up with lights flashing. Deputy Walker gets out of one of them, along with 2 other deputies Jake doesn't recognize. Deputy Walker walks over to Jake first. "This is your property?" he asks. "Yep," Jake tells him, "and I definitely did not give permission for this meeting." Deputy Walker nods and walks over to Tiffany at the podium. "Ma'am, I need to speak with you immediately." The entire meeting stops. Everyone is staring. Tiffany walks over with a couple of other board members, looking confident. "This gentleman says you're on his private property without permission," Deputy Walker says. "This is community property," Tiffany insists. "We've been through this before with your department. He doesn't own this land. Ma'am, I've personally seen his deed and surveyed this property. This is definitely his private property. You and everyone here are trespassing." Another board member pipes up. "Our lawyer specifically assured us we have community rights to this area." Deputy Walker sighs. "Sir, I don't know what your lawyer told you, but this is private property, and I need everyone to pack up and leave immediately." "This is absolutely ridiculous," Tiffany shouts. "We are not leaving. This is our community space, and we have every right to be here. Ma'am, if you don't leave voluntarily right now, I will have to arrest you for criminal trespassing." At this point, the other 55, 60 people are realizing that the situation is very serious. Most of them start frantically packing up their chairs and heading for their cars, but Tiffany and a few of the board members are digging in their heels. "I'm calling our lawyer right now," one of them says, pulling out his phone. "You can call whoever you want," Deputy Walker tells him, but you need to do it from somewhere else. This is private property, and you are all trespassing. It takes another 30 minutes, but eventually everyone leaves. Tiffany is the absolute last to go, and she is furious. This is not over, she tells Jake as she's walking away. The HOA is going to sue you for everything you're worth. After everyone is gone, Deputy Walker sticks around to talk to Jake. That was something else, he says, shaking his head. I've never seen an HOA try to hold a 60-person meeting on someone else's private property before. What can I do about this? Jake asks him. They're clearly not going to stop. Well, you could sue them, Deputy Walker says. What they just did, organizing a 60-person meeting on your property without permission, that's a pretty serious violation. You might also want to think about getting an attorney to send them something stronger than a cease and desist. That weekend, Jake called his lawyer and told him everything that had happened. The lawyer was absolutely flabbergasted. They held a 60-person meeting on your property without permission, after you've already told them it's private property and filed police reports? Yeah, and they've been stealing my signs and ignoring cease and desist letters. The lawyer was quiet for a minute. This is actually pretty serious. What they're doing could be considered criminal trespassing, theft, harassment, and intentional interference with property rights. You could probably sue them for significant damages and get a permanent injunction. What kind of damages? Jake asked. Well, let's see. They've been using your property without permission for months. If this was a rental property, what would you charge for lake access? They've also damaged your quiet enjoyment of your property, stolen your signs, and now they've essentially held a commercial event on your land without permission. Plus legal fees, of course. How much are we talking about? It's hard to say without doing research, but probably tens of thousands of dollars, maybe more if we can prove ongoing harassment and intentional conduct. Jake told him to go ahead and file the lawsuit. The next week, Jake's lawyer filed a comprehensive lawsuit against the HOA and several individual board members. They sued for trespassing, theft, harassment, intentional interference with property rights, and unjust enrichment. They asked for actual damages, punitive damages, legal fees, and a permanent injunction preventing them from coming on Jake's property. The lawsuit hit them like a freight train. Jake's lawyer told him later that their attorney called within 24 hours of being served, trying to negotiate a settlement. But they weren't interested in settling at that point. They wanted this to go to court. The discovery phase was absolutely amazing. They subpoenaed all the HOA records and communications, and what they found was incredible. It turns out the HOA had never actually done any legal research on the property. They had never consulted with lawyers about their rights to the lake. Tiffany had basically just decided that the lake should be community property and convinced everyone else to go along with it. There were email discussions about our lake and how to deal with the difficult property owner. They had actually budgeted money for lake maintenance and discussed building a bathhouse and expanded dock on Jake's property. Even better, they found leaked emails between board members where they explicitly acknowledged that Jake probably did own the property, but they figured if they just acted like it was theirs long enough, they could establish some kind of adverse possession claim. One email from Tiffany to another board member said, even if he technically owns it, if we use it openly for long enough, we can probably claim it legally. My cousin's a paralegal, and she says possession is 9/10 of the law. Jake's lawyer was practically salivating when he saw these documents. The other side tried to claim that there had been an innocent misunderstanding and that they were relying on professional advice. But when they deposed their board members, it became clear that they had never actually consulted any professionals. The deposition transcripts were brutal. Tiffany in particular came across as arrogant and entitled. When asked directly if she had ever seen Jake's property deed, she said no. When asked if she had ever done any legal research on property boundaries, she said no. When asked what gave her the right to hold meetings on Jake's property, she said the community needed space and it wasn't being used. The case went to trial about 8 months later. It was a bench trial, just a judge, no jury. The HOA's lawyer tried to argue that there had been an innocent mistake and that they had acted in good faith, but the evidence was overwhelming. They had video footage of them stealing signs, emails showing they knew Jake owned the property, and testimony from multiple witnesses about their aggressive behavior. The judge was not impressed with their arguments. In his ruling, he found that the HOA and individual board members had committed willful trespassing, theft, and harassment. He awarded Jake $45,000 in actual damages based on fair rental value for lake access, $25,000 in punitive damages, and $30,000 in legal fees. He also issued a permanent injunction prohibiting anyone associated with the HOA from setting foot on Jake's property. But here's the best part. The judge also ruled that the individual board members were personally liable for the damages because they had acted willfully and in bad faith beyond the scope of their authority. This meant that Tiffany and the other board members couldn't just pay the judgment from HOA funds. They were personally on the hook for $100,000. The aftermath was absolutely beautiful. Within 2 months of the judgment, Tiffany and her husband had to put their house up for sale to pay their portion of the damages. 2 other board members also ended up selling their homes. The HOA itself went into financial crisis because their insurance wouldn't cover the damages willful misconduct exclusion. Several families in the subdivision sued the HOA board for mismanagement and breach of fiduciary duty. The whole HOA ended up dissolving about a year later. But wait, it gets even better. About 6 months after the judgment, Jake got a call from a real estate developer. It turns out all the drama with the HOA had made the subdivision less desirable, and property values had dropped significantly. The developer was interested in buying several of the lots at below-market prices to build rental properties. He also made Jake an offer not to buy his lake frontage, but to lease access rights for a private fishing club. The lease payment? $50,000 per year. So not only did Jake get $100,000 in damages from the lawsuit, but he also got a long-term income stream from the very lake that the HOA tried to steal from him. The moral of this story? Never mess with someone's private property, especially when you have absolutely no legal right to it. These entitled HOA board members thought they could just take what they wanted through intimidation and lies. Instead, they ended up losing their homes and destroying their own community. Sometimes the best revenge is just letting entitled people destroy themselves with their own greed and stupidity. Jake didn't have to do anything except stand his ground and let the legal system work exactly as it's supposed to. That's the power of knowing your rights and having the courage to fight back against bullies who think they can walk all over you. Jake turned what could have been a nightmare into a 6-figure payday, and now he's getting paid $50,000 a year from the very property they tried to steal. If you enjoyed this epic tale of HOA justice, make sure you're subscribed to HOA Climax, because we've got more incredible stories of entitled neighbors getting exactly what they deserve. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next.